Getting the metals right in a design is important. There's lots of little things that are metal in any building. Occasionally there are whole surfaces of them, ranging from quilted or diamond plate metal in a diner, for example, to metal brushed steel walls. In this particular design, where there's lots of little things that are metal, and these are the little jewels, the little accents on the design. We've got iron on the door handles and a brushed steel on the channels that run above the baseboard and also on the railing and the stairs. Now all these objects are actually comparatively small, so what really matters is that we see a reflection travel along it and that they really look like a metal. What I'll do is to get the brushed steel configured first. I'll double click on it here in the materials section of my content browser. In here we can see it's just a standard, well, straight gray as it came in, being a shader effect shader in Maya. I'll delete the original and bring in another constant 3 vector. For the brushed steel, I'll double click on the color and bring it up to kind of a midline gray and bring just the touch of warmth into it, a little bit of yellow. I like to add a little bit of color into this so it's not just a cold straight out gray. I'll click OK and there's the initial color. I need to connect it across to the base color and then worry about how metallic this is. The default shading here gives us, well, we could call it a pearl gray paint or something close. What I'll do is introduce another constant by pressing and holding 1 and clicking in the work area. Then I'll connect this across to metallic. Our metallic values really range between 1 and 0 and nothing much in between. It's either metallic or not. At the moment with it at 0, it's a paint color. When I take this value of this constant up to 1, this becomes a metal and shades like it. Now get some other constants in for spec and roughness. Again, putting in a constant by pressing and holding 1, connecting across to specular. I'll bring up the specular on this to roughly around 0.6, give or take. And now I'm ready for some roughness. In a metal then, this really determines where that reflection goes. So again, one more constant, and a little bit of roughness will work. I'll bring this value in to maybe the 0.25 range, give or take. So I've got a metal with a blurry reflection. Now if you'd like, you can go further, introducing a grain in here for a spec map, for example, or even a normal, so the surface really has that grain to it. I'll put this on, though, and see how this appears. Saving the material, and anything that this was applied to in Maya will come across here in Unreal. Now I've got the brushed steel, and we can select the stairs to see where it is. In here, on the stairs then, we can see under Materials, scrolling down a bit, that it's got iron, black paint, and white concrete. The brushed steel actually shows up on the walls. There it is. Right in the Materials is element 0 on that wall behind the front desk. What this says also is we need to make sure of the materials in various places. A lot of the materials, as we can see, came across as a white because they were a shader effects. And again, that was a design choice to see it in better true-to-game lighting in Maya, and know that I would have to configure the materials here in Unreal a bit. I'll double-click on iron and bring that material up to edit it. For the iron, I was anticipating sort of a deep black, I'll call it, with some yellow under it, as if it's a wrought iron color or something in that range, although this is obviously not wrought iron. I'll put in the color first, bringing in a constant 3, dialing that into the base color, and adding a color in. I'll bring up this value just above black, and I'm going to introduce a little bit of color in there. Just a little bit gets that color kind of going, making sure it's actually quite dimmed down. If you notice, there's a difference in here in the color, in the way that appears. What we can see here is when we double click on that color and turn on sRGB, we can make sure that color stays very, very dark. There's a difference in here in how those colors react depending on this being on or off. I'll leave it off and try that again. There's my dark value. And again, I may want to make it even darker still. But what I'll do is get that metalness in and see if that flies first. We can always come back and adjust if we need, so don't be afraid to get something in to see what it looks like. I'll put a constant in and shift this over to the metallic, putting in a value of 1. Yes, it is a metal. That's better because it goes much blacker, but we start to see that color show up in the specular highlight. Now give it some specularity. another constant into the spec, and pulling up that value fairly low, maybe just under 0.5. Now add in some roughness. For this, it's going to be fairly rough. I want well, not absolutely a shiny surface, quite the opposite. Really kind of a muted out metal in here. So I'll bring up this roughness value, trying it around 0.5 first. It's pretty good. We can still tell, especially in the edge, governed by a Fresnel property, that there's a reflection. We may want to bring this down just a touch to, we'll call it 0.4. So we can definitely see it's a dark metal with a little bit of a, we'll call it a French gray in the highlight, and a reflection that really shows up kind of on the edges and is very blurred across that surface. I'll save it and see how this looks. That's better. What we can see here is that the door handles and the stair railings have gone dark. I'll hit play and see how this sounds. Yes, I know I need to rebuild the lighting. That's what Unreal is telling me in that notice in red. I haven't done any lighting at all, so that's okay. In fact, I haven't really touched the glass, and so what I'm seeing in here is the building is entirely in shadow, which is blue. That's because of that default daylight. And again, I'm just looking for the right material in the right place. This looks pretty good. It's nice and dark, and even in this scene, as we scroll up and down, we can see a little bit of something on the surface in terms of a reflection that lets us know it's that dark, shiny metal. The doors look good too, and I'll press W to zoom in and check it out. What we can see here is these definitely feel like a kind of a rustic yet somehow modern iron door handle. Maybe something from one of our favorite retro fixture companies or something similar. But I like the depth in it, the darkness, and where that highlight shows up, it's a mix of the ambient color and a little bit of that warm gray I had put in. I'll zip around one more time and go check out the brushed steel. Zooming in on a place I can see here, just a little bit along the baseboard. We feel, well, again, that it's definitely a metal, but we can just barely see a little something going on. But it's definitely different from that black paint semi-gloss and the white walls above. I'll hit escape to get out, and my metals are looking pretty good. The last one I'll deal with is the anodized bronze. Double-clicking on it, and in here, I've got a color already in. And this is because I had made this a blend, and so that color came across nicely. I'll see what happens when I start to get those metal properties in. It's definitely a metal, and it's already looking pretty bronzy. I'm going to let it be considerably shiny, really pulling up that spec, roughly in the 0.8 range, and then adding a little bit of roughness in. I'll let it spread over that surface, and that looks pretty good. I like how that's happening. It's really feeling like a bronze, but I do want to make it darker. I'll double-click on that color and pull it way down. That's better. I want this material to really darken out, almost black in some places. Maybe even a little bit darker will work. Don't be afraid to get in there and really configure this material, and then you'll test it in your scene. But this is that bronze I want. Now you can always go in and play with those colors. Again, clicking on it and maybe going a touch warmer, darker still, and check it in sRGB. I'll pull mine almost to black and click OK. And that's really the color I'm after for the anodized bronze. It's really got a bronzy blackness to it, but it's got a little bit of a warmth going on, and just that color showing in the specular highlight. It's working very well, and I'll leave it alone as this until I see it in lighting. Here's where we can see this as we look up and go outside maybe. I'll hit play so I can see my scene, and there's my anodized bronze on the window frames. Even in that blue light, there's just a little bit of that deep warmth going on, and almost in a black surface, or at least a deep chocolate we'll call it in this case until we get lighting in. I can definitely see along this that there's something happening in the reflection, and what that means is that it's working, but it does need some reflection spheres in here to really work properly, as we need more localized reflections to really make these come to life. But getting the metallic properties, the specular and the roughness channels in, and getting those colors dialed in so it starts to behave like that metal we expect is really the first step.